Hey. Hi, and welcome to this episode of WeRise with Aaliyah. I'm so happy today to have the amazing Nadia with us. Nadia, also known as the Spiritual Psychologist on Instagram. You are a counseling therapist. Have I got that right?
Counseling psychologist.
Counseling psychologist. Sorry. You have so many accolades and qualifications to your names, and I don't want to get any of them wrong. So I will let you introduce yourself in the way that you want people to understand what it is that you do.
Yeah. So thanks for having me on. I'm really excited for the conversation that we're about to have. Um, so I'm a counseling psychologist and I work in private practice at the moment. I've also trained in family constellations work. So I run group workshops centered around family dynamics, intergenerational trauma, and, really working with personal issues through a more collective lens and a more spiritual lens as well. So trying to marry the psychology and spirituality together.
Amazing. And I'm so interested in the name that you call yourself, the spiritual psychologist, because obviously you've got a background in sort of traditional psychology and counseling, but then you've kind of moved towards a more spiritual approach in helping the women that you serve. And that just speaks to my heart because I also take a spiritual approach to my women's empowerment coaching that I do. So, yeah, I was just interested in that shift, or I mean, it was probably more of a journey, I'm guessing, that took you into that more spiritual path. And then the other question is, what impact does that have for the women that you work with?
Mm. Well, from a personal perspective, I guess being a Muslim woman, faith has always been a really big part of my life. I mean, I was in Islamic schools on the weekends from the age of about 6 years old. I did an Islamic GCSE as well in Islamic studies. And when I got to university level, obviously in academics, especially in psychology, even though it comes from, the study of the soul, if we think of the actual meaning where the term originated, but actually studying it in Western institutes, the spiritual aspect is very devoid. So for me, throughout my academic journey, I've been searching for ways to incorporate spirituality back into the psychology that I'm being taught so that it really aligns with my values, because I want to be offering something that I already embody. I don't want to be operating just from a Western lens. I don't want to be operating from an individualistic lens because I come from a collectivist culture. So yeah, it was a lot of self-learning behind the scenes whilst doing my doctorate and then postdoctorate as well, gaining knowledge, qualifications in more Eastern traditions. So Reiki healing, which comes from Japan, I learned things around acupressure, EFT, which is the tapping on the pressure points to release sort of stagnant emotion, and then going into family constellations as well, and Sufi healing, so which really draws on the spiritual elements and working with the energetic body and the things that we can't see, which obviously Western psychology doesn't touch on, obviously because of research that is lacking in these areas, but also because it's not part of the belief system in the West, because we are very secular in these countries. So yeah, we have to go further afield to bring back the things that speak to us, because we're not just from this Western world.
That's so, so interesting. And, you are definitely a woman after my own heart because taking that holistic approach, I think, is really vital for women, especially to heal, whether it's from trauma or whatever is going on in their lives, because it's we're not just, you know, we're not just secular, but also it's the way I see it, because I always see everything sort of through a feminist lens, that this is a masculine approach as well. It's a patriarchal approach that denies the unseen, that denies the things that you can't prove with your logical, rational mind through scientific observation. If I can't feel it, see it, touch it, taste it, it's not real,
Yeah.
right? But actually, there is so much that we don't understand but that we feel when we practice, right? And sometimes I believe that it's those things that can have the most profound effects on us.
Mm, yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like my mind is going in lots of different directions right now. But I want to come back to the question you asked about how it kind of marries in my work with the women that I work with. And I know we'll probably explore some of this later through the episode. So just to kind of touch on the beginning, I feel like there's a lot of unlearning that
Mm,
happens because women come into sessions. I do work predominantly with South Asian women. A lot of them are Muslim, and there's so many narratives around emotions, and there's a lot of cultural conditioning around what to do with emotions and how to be in relationships that actually goes against being in touch with your own soul. So there's part of that going on alongside working with whatever issue they've brought to the session as well. Um, it is a very complex thing, but emotionally, to get women more in touch with their own truth by actually paying attention to what they're feeling is such a huge thing because we're taught to cut off from our emotions. We're taught to show up in a way that the world wants us to show up. And that makes us operate in a very disconnected and inauthentic way. So in my sessions, a lot of it is, let's sit with what's here right now. Let's hear you speak your truth, even if you can't do that in your home.
and
So, yeah,
I can imagine that must be just so releasing, I guess, for women who just haven't had an opportunity to even be visible, I suppose, in their own homes when they are living with in-laws. Um,
yeah,
and
gosh, it makes
having,
me so
yeah,
emotional. Yeah,
right? Like even someone asking you, how are you? We're not used to hearing that as daughter-in-laws a lot of the time, and that's,
it's to say, alhamdulillah, everything's good. But when you really want to speak to someone, where do you go when you really want to be honest with someone? Because sometimes women don't even get that within their own families, because their own mothers will say to them, oh, it's fine, like, oh, it's not that bad. Or, it was like this when I got married. And there's so many ways that a woman is shut down or a daughter-in-law is shut down.
and you've provided that container, haven't you, for daughter-in-laws to come together and to share and to talk about all these taboo things that there just isn't space to talk about. And I just think that it's incredible what you've created. And I'm sure our listeners would love to hear more about the work that you do with daughter-in-laws in particular.
Yeah. Yeah. The container as well. Interestingly, it started off in COVID. And obviously during COVID time, everyone was at home. So women who were living with their in-laws who might have had work to get away, and have some space, or they might have visited friends or family, were now confined in the environment that they didn't, they don't want to be in, or that they're really struggling to be with the people who also live with them. So it was really heartwarming, just having a space where we can come together and share what's going on. And I mean, I had a woman who was joining these weekly sessions from her cupboard
Wow.
because she was at home with her in-laws. Somebody could hear her, her husband might walk in. So she would sit in her closet. I'm sure it was obviously big enough, but I imagine she was quite cramped, and she would join the call from there because that's the only way that she would feel safe enough to be in a space that she really needed.
Yeah. And what do you see are the most common issues, challenges, situations that, South Asian women who are daughter-in-laws, either living or not living with their in-laws, what do they come to you with?
Yeah. Gosh, there's a whole host of things with that group that I started in 2020. It's evolved so much because the amount of issues and the different themes and topics that come up is just so varied. Um, but I would say one of the main things is around power dynamics and sadly abuse, emotional and psychological abuse. And we touched on, before we jumped on the call, we touched on patriarchy. And that's such a huge experience that we are still living within on a day-to-day basis, that other people might be like, oh, does that even happen anymore? Or, actually,
Mm.
do women still live like this? Or is that still an issue? Like, for example, a woman needing to ask permission from people other than her husband when she wants to go out. It's like these things are part of thousands of women's day-to-day life.
Absolutely. It was part of mine.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's so common. And I mean, I don't know any woman personally who hasn't been on the receiving end of the patriarchy. We can't escape it. We're
No,
living in it. Some
it's the
women are more
soup.
affected, but yeah,
I heard a phrase from someone that I follow that, she calls it the patriarchal soup that we live in. We're just surrounded by it, and it permeates every interaction that we have. And it, for me, the really interesting part is the way it makes us see ourselves and how we begin to internalize our own inferiority and our low self-worth, and then we lose our voice.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
that something that you also you know talk about in your group?
yeah. It comes up a lot. There's a real sense of becoming small in these environments. And sometimes, even if women are living separate from their in laws, but there's still maybe a lot of involvement, or there's still a lot of rules and expectations. Maybe her husband is also part of this, that he also has those same rules and expectations that his family has had, or he struggles to break away from them as well. So then she's also impacted by that. So the couples sort of need to go on their own journey together against cultural, patriarchal norms that we have, so that they can actually live more freely and live more honestly. But yeah, there is a huge element of women feeling caged in, feeling like they don't matter, like they're not allowed to speak, they're not allowed to choose. And it takes so much power away from the individual. So a really big part of whether it's group work, individual work, is about helping women to reaffirm their power, even to themselves and then to other people. I mean, I come across this kind of struggle when it comes to setting boundaries a lot, because women want to set boundaries. It's okay, tell me what boundaries are, what boundaries might I need. This is what I'm struggling with, and how do I express my boundaries? But actually, to be able to do any of that, we first need to know what they are.
Mm.
And we need to know ourselves well enough to know what it is that we need. And then we can communicate it, then we can express it, then we can act on it. But it's a whole journey, it's never linear. And we have to experiment a lot and feel the feelings that come with the struggles that we're going through, to realize what's okay for us and what's not okay for us.
Wow, there is so much there, isn't it? And I can feel from your voice, I can just feel how much compassion you have for the women that you work with, and the energy that you're
Ugh,
bringing to that.
I mean, cry. I mean, it's such a it is such a sensitive topic for me, because I feel like so many women go through it. And why have we not been speaking about this before? Why aren't we speaking about it more? There is still so much silence around it, and I know things are changing and people are becoming more aware. But I think the sadness for me comes a lot from what's been lost for women, not just us, but women, our elders, our mothers, our aunts, our sisters, and the lives that they've not been able to live because they've been in systems that have taken their life force away from them. And that's what really gets me. And that's also why I do the work that I do, because life's too short for us to not do with it what God wants from us. Not to experience the joy, the beauty, the excitement, the love. Because South Asian women, we're really good at experiencing pain and suffering. We can all get PhDs in in that. Um, But we really need to come back to, because that's not our natural state, you know. There is always going to be pain and suffering, but there's also a lot of joy and beauty as well, which I feel like we and the people around us can do an injustice to us by stopping us from being in touch with those things. So yeah.
Oh, it feels like sometimes, we have a badge of honor, on pain and suffering. It's held up as something to kind of identify with. Um, and I know me personally, sometimes it feels like it's not even safe to be happy. It's not safe to express our joy or our beauty because people don't like it.
Yeah.
They don't like it. They don't know what to do with you. If you're a happy, joyful, or outwardly, internally beautiful, expressive woman, you know, th- that's not what we've been conditioned to be. And that's not what the system accepts. So it actually feels safer to just kind of sit in our pain and identify with our suffering.
Mm,
Because,
yeah.
yeah,
It's like that's what we're told, you know. We're
mm,
told this is how you're allowed to exist.
yeah,
And if you try
exactly.
to exist beyond that, or you try to come out of that, we're going to make
It's
that
like,
for you.
yeah, it's like, who do you think you are?
Yeah. Yeah.
Get back in your box.
Mhm.
There was a couple of the other things that you said that I wanted to touch on. So one of the things that you brought up was the fact that it's a system, right? So it's not just about, interpersonal relationships or specific personalities, right? But actually it's the system that we operate in. Okay, so I would really like to know a little bit more about how you view the the extended family structure that exists in, the South Asian community and women's place in it.
Mm, yeah. I think because a lot of us living in the West, you know, we grow up in a culture that is individualistic. We grow up seeing families who, you know, it's mum, dad, and kids, the nuclear family. But in our own homes, despite our physical spaces being set up for nuclear families, we're living in a very collective way where we are living with extended family, whether it's in the same house, whether it's nearby. Um, the level of interaction with extended family for South Asians is very different to what you'd find in mainstream for the most part. And there's some research. This is probably one of the earliest pieces that I've come across that identifies a woman's role within the family as being the role of a kin keeper. And this was not done with South Asian women. This research was, I think, done in America.
Yes, I've come across that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's something about the woman's role being more social and emotional, and being a role that puts her in the position of maintaining family relations. And obviously from an Islamic perspective, we do have that, you know, but it's not just reserved for women, it's everyone. Um, but there is an element of the woman being the one that keeps the family together. And I think when you're living in an extended family as well, but your personal views and your capacity even might not be aligned to that way, you know, maybe there's some issues that you're going through and you don't have the availability to support an aunt with something, or maybe actually, you know, you're really career focused and you don't want to get so involved in hosting family gatherings every weekend. These are the day-to-day real life differences.
They're like friction points, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. And there's something about the culture of the family that we go into as well that might dictate what they see our role as being. So, as a daughter-in-law, it might be actually, I want you to live here so you can look after my parents. I mean, that's still a very common thing that South Asian men propose to potential partners and their
Yep.
wives. And I mean, there's a lot to say about that in itself. I think that's a whole other topic. But then for a woman to not be given that choice around, actually, wait, do I want to do that? And okay, how long do I want to do that for? And was I even like that with my own parents? So there really needs to be space to hear a woman for her own person. But when we live in these systems where there are multiple people, there's multiple generations, things from different generations are going to trickle down as well. So the norms and expectations that our in-laws have or grandparents have are going to be different to our own because we're from a different time. But when those expectations trickle down, again, that's another point of tension, because then you're straddling two different generational concepts of what it means to be a woman, what it means to maintain relations and, be in the family. And some research talks about this struggle for South Asian women in particular as a struggle between modernity and tradition. So, yeah, we have a mix of all of that because, yes, we, to an extent, we do value family relations. We do value respecting our elders, but we also know ourselves a bit more, I think. We do have a bit more awareness of what our rights are. We have more exposure to what's possible for women as well. So we're not necessarily going to want to do things the same way that our mothers or our grandmothers or our mother-in-laws did. And again, that's a change. And not everyone is going to be open or accepting of that change because how they've done things has been different. And anytime we're bringing something into a system that is different, there is always going to be some resistance.
So true. So everything that you're saying just resonates so strongly with me. I was just writing about this the other day. I just wrote a blog about this whole sort of difference between the individualistic kind of culture of the West, and then the more collective centric culture of, well, the rest of the world, really. Whether you're looking at South Asia or Africa or South America or China or whatever, I mean, generally everywhere apart from Western Europe and the colonized, North America, has more of a collective structure to their society and to their everyday, interactions. And I have always thought that kind of more very Western approach to therapy kind of goes with this kind of hyper individualistic notion. And actually, it's cutting us off, if for those of us from, non-Western backgrounds and heritage, it's cutting us off from like a really core part of who we are. And actually, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? We can recognize that there are toxic dynamics in some of these extended family scenarios, right? We can recognize that women have been disempowered by a lot of the power structures that exist in these family systems, right? But does that mean that we cut everyone off, put all these boundaries up? I call it, the walls, really. They're not boundaries, are they? They're just walls around our hearts, walls around our homes. No one's allowed in. I'm just going to live my life. I'm going to cut everyone off if they can't respect my boundaries. Done, kind of thing. And I feel like actually there's a middle ground somewhere where we can have a reciprocal relationship. We can make things work in a way that serves us, right? And not lose the richness of our culture, which comes from family, right? Because it doesn't just bring us oppression, right? It also brings us fun and connection and a support network, right? So that's the amazing work that I think you're doing in your space, which is around, healing those relationships. And yes, focusing on the, putting a woman, of course, at the center. It's her life at the end of the day, and, figuring out what she wants for herself, but in that more kind of like balanced way, between the individual and the collective. Am I right? Have I kind of got that
Yeah,
right?
no, I think you're spot on, and it's reminding me of one of the interviews I did on my doctorate. This is going back a little while now, but I still remember it because it really made me see how actually even therapeutically when Muslim women are going to Western mainstream, secular therapists, they're not they might not be taking away things that are helpful and conducive to their journey. So there was one woman that shared with me that, she was living with her in-laws at the time. Being at home was really challenging for her. She would have a lot of arguments with her husband because of the in-laws, and she was kind of told by her therapist that, okay, you need to maybe set some boundaries, take yourself out for a walk when this happens. And, that piece of advice and suggestion could work for somebody. And, I'm sure it works for a lot of people, but for this woman in particular, that actually made things worse, because now it was like, oh, look, she's left the house. Like, oh, look, why is she just walking out? So it actually became more difficult for her, and she was stopped using that approach by her family. And that's tricky, because then a woman is like, oh, I'm trying to do the work and I'm trying to manage things better. But even that is a struggle. And I think it's just about finding ways that do work, because there's a lot of ways that will work. There's, for example, actually having maybe your husband on board when it comes to having certain conversations, allowing him to be the spokesperson rather than, because we hear a lot about women, use your voice and feel empowered through using your voice and speaking your truth. And we know in a lot of families that's either not, it's not welcomed, or there's actual risk to a woman for what could be seen as speaking disrespectfully or answering back, even if she's not doing those things. So in those instances, like, I think actually having your husband there as a support, or speaking to him, for him to speak to his parents, some people might see that as like, oh no, but the woman should be able to speak for herself. But actually that's not going to work for everyone. And there's nothing wrong with being able to rely and trust your husband to support you. And actually sometimes that's more influential as well.
Actually brings me really nicely to another question I had. 'Cause you mentioned something earlier about, the relationship between the man and the woman, and the impact that, difficult relationships with in-laws can have on the marital relationship. And I just wanted to ask you, in terms of, like, what are you seeing in the women that come to you? Are men in general learning and growing on this journey as much as the women are? Are they getting on board?
It's a good question. Yeah. And I do have a more hopeful aspect to share around that, because I mean, we know women are more emotionally in tune with themselves. We know the stats around men and suicide rates, and, men cope in different ways as well. Um, whether it's anger, shutting off, problem solving. I know in South Asian Sikh communities, alcoholism, addiction is a really big feature. But what I am seeing, even though women do use services more, women do seek support more, women are more open about the struggles they're going through, I have seen men come on board as well and actually want to work with their wife, because they are invested in the marriage. The marriage is important enough to them that they do want to try and do something different. And I think that change is happening. And it might be slow. I don't know. I don't know the speed of it, or the rate of it. Um, but I do feel like there is some level of openness from men. And I think it does take a bit more time, though, from my experience, from the women that I've worked with as well. It takes longer for their partners to realize what's happening. It takes them a bit longer to understand the gravity of the situation, but they do get somewhere. I mean, I only work with women in my group, but a lot of them have shared with me how, from the sessions, they've then spoken to their husbands about certain things, and things have changed with their husbands. So that's the power of women working on themselves as well, because when you work on yourself, you also take that back into your marriage, and you can also have a positive impact with your husband. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I've also heard of women who couldn't have spoken more clearly, or couldn't have shared more than what they did, but still the marriage didn't last. And there's a lot of factors within that. But yeah, men are becoming more open from what I've heard and what I've seen. But I do feel like there is a long way to go.
Yeah. Oh, well, that is really good to know that things are moving. They might not be moving very fast, but at least they're moving. And yeah, it's great that women are at least taking the lead. We can't guarantee that husbands, partners are going to come along with us, but because we have free will at the end of the day, and it's their choice whether they choose to also, wake up and do the work, as we say. But that shouldn't really be a reason for us to not do our own work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is it's also one reason why I branched more into couples work and family work, because having worked individually for so many years, I quickly realized that this is not an individual issue.
Yeah. And that brings me so nicely onto the next question that I had for you, which was around the work that you do on family constellations. Now, until about a year ago, I didn't know what family constellations work was. I found out about it because my mum has been going on about it, saying that apparently we need to do this. My mum is very cool. She's,
End of her
yeah,
already.
she's into all sorts. She's been on her own self-development and spiritual journey for decades. I was reading bits from Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life, when I was like 7 years old, because it was
Amazing.
yeah. So she's that kind of lady. um but yeah, so she's been telling me to find someone. She's like, Alia, you must find someone to do family constellation work. And I'm like, okay, mom, okay, I will. And I haven't really, and I still don't really fully understand what it is. I have read up about it. And then miraculously, while I was sort of looking at your Instagram grid yesterday in preparation for today, I saw that you've got a workshop coming up on
Yeah.
family constellations. And I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. I must ask Nadia about this tomorrow. So can you please explain to me and our listeners, what is family constellations work? And how does it actually work? Because that's the bit that I don't understand. Like, does the whole family have to be there? Is it like group therapy? Like, what is it? How does it work?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm so excited that you asked this question and that you have an interest in this, because family constellations is growing. It's growing in popularity for a very good reason. Um, but let me just say a little bit about the practical aspect of it, because I think you already mentioned it about the not really understanding how it works. And I don't think you can ever understand how it works. I think you definitely experience it. It's a very experiential way of working, and you only know it through experience as well. It's like, with meditation, you can read up as much as you want, okay, sit like this, put your mind in this kind of space and, do XYZ, but you're not going to know what it feels like to meditate until you meditate. So similar with family constellations, to really fully and not even understand, because again, I've been doing this work for a year or so now, and the understanding, it's not logical. Going back to what we were speaking about earlier, there's very spiritual elements to it. There's a lot that occurs during a constellation that involves something bigger than ourselves. And it's such a powerful, magical experience that I would highly recommend. But yeah, you don't need your whole family there. I mean, people do come with either their partner or, a sister, a mother, and everyone else in the group are usually strangers. You know, maybe they've met each other at a different workshop before or something, but you basically have a group of people who are all interested in working on something through family constellations. And everyone who comes, they don't have an idea. They might have an idea of what they want to work on, but you have no idea of where it's going to go or what's going to come up. Because when we create that container in the room and we set the intention to do the work, we're tapping into a field of knowing. So this is a field that contains unseen, unconscious information. And that information is linked to our family. So the things that we don't see but are energetically present within our family systems. And this can go back several generations. But every person who's in that room, because we've all come from somewhere, we all have parents, we all have grandparents, great grandparents, we bring that energy with us into the room. And when a person is working on an issue, I'll have a little bit of a chat, see what they want to work on, what's present for them emotionally, energetically. And then we choose people from the group to represent people or abstract things related to the issue that they want to work on. And those representatives tap into this field of knowing and can receive information through their body.
Wow.
And then we follow those movements. And it is unexplainable. I mean, I'm trying trying my best to explain it, but it's so profound. It taps into something that we wouldn't be able to do individually, like, just sitting down, reading through something or writing something down.
Mm.
But we do all tap into something when we sit and reflect, and when we have moments of introspection, when we pray as well. We are connecting into things that are unseen. We're connecting into a field that does span across time and space. We might make a prayer for somebody who's passed away and believe that it still reaches them. That's similar. There's an unseen energetic component there. We also believe that, when we do charity, that can take away something that might have happened to us previously, um, maybe some sins that we had, that, it expiates things in our past, but it can also clear our path going forward. Um, we don't see that when we put the money in the jar or when we click donate on on the link. But that's the belief that we have, even from an Islamic perspective, that all of these things that we do, they span across time, space, they span across generations. Um, it's also why, we are taught that one of the best things we can leave behind once we've passed are children who are going to pray for us, and righteous children work and teachings that are going to continue to benefit people, because they're also going to continue to benefit us when our soul is no longer in this body. So family constellation work really encompasses a lot of similar beliefs to what we have as Muslims.
Wow. When you were talking, I was just getting tingles everywhere, and it sounds so mystical, um, which I love. Anything mystical, I'm always drawn to. It sounds really powerful, and I think my mum might be onto something.
Yes.
And yeah, I think we're gonna have to check out your workshop. Do you want to just tell us when it is?
Yeah.
Actually, yeah.
Up is 20th September, so it's actually in a couple of weeks' time in
Oh,
Bristol. So it's in person, and it's a full day, so 9:30 till 4 p.m. And we have lunch in between and a couple of breaks. So yeah, it's a full day experience, and if you come to it, you will meet some amazing people, and even though you don't know them, they will be a really big part of your journey.
wow. Oh, it sounds incredible.
I do want to
Oh,
mention how this links to family. So even some of the things that we've been talking about, one of the foundations of family constellation work is about putting things back in their natural order. Um, one of the things I've started to talk about on my page is how things that happen in the previous generation are impacting how we live as families now. So, for example, if there is a trauma that our in-laws have gone through, like mother-in-law and father-in-law, that for whatever reason the father-in-law hasn't been available to his wife, he's maybe had some trauma happen to him that's taken his parts of his soul away from his wife and his family, that leaves space open then for the son to step into the father's place. And obviously, that's not the place of the son.
Mm.
The son is the child. The mother and father are the mother and father. But if the father has not been available energetically, the son takes that role. And sometimes the mother might look towards the son for that because her partner's not been available. So then when this son now gets married, he's not available for his wife because he's still in the position next to his mum. And he has to let go of that link with his mum so that he can actually have a relationship with his wife and then start his own family. So family constellations helps to put these disordered things back into their natural order so that life and energy can flow more smoothly from one generation to the next. And when we talk about in-law issues, a lot of it is with intergenerational trauma.
Mm.
So that's just one example of how family constellations can serve us in our communities as well.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be incredibly, sounds like very deep work, you know?
It's
Yeah.
very, I describe it as like soul work.
Mm. Yeah. And it's beyond the normal kind of like social or psychological and that an analytical approach that we often take. And it's kind of getting to the root, I suppose, of these kind of imbalances that we have.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're common, aren't they? They're everywhere, really.
Mm,
As a community, as a collective, we do have a lot of healing to do. So I think it's just absolutely amazing that you're offering this work. Um, and yeah, on that note, how can people find you? How can they get to know more about the work that you do? I know you've got a membership for daughter-in-laws, and then you've got your podcast,
yeah,
We Married the Family. So yeah, it will be great for our listeners to know where they can connect with you.
yeah. So I'm most active on Instagram. My handle is at spirit at that's an email, but yeah, my handle is spiritual.psychologist, and my website as well, spiritualpsychologist.co.uk. And that does have information about my workshops on this, got information about my membership, which is either you join on a monthly basis or you can have an annual membership. And we meet every month and discuss different topics related to what daughter-in-laws are going through. And sometimes we just get together and have a chat and a catch up. And um, yeah, it's a really fun and supportive space. There's links to my podcast on there as well. So it's We Married the Family, and that's on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And I also upload them to YouTube as well. So people can subscribe to my channel as well.
Oh, amazing. I'm sure so many of you know, the listeners will find that really, really helpful. I know, in-law relations are such a big topic. They always have been, and I don't think that this issue is going anywhere. So, yeah, we're really grateful that you're in this space, leading these conversations, and bringing things into the light that have been just suppressed for so long. Um, I had one question for you, around the advice that you would give to a daughter-in-law right now who might be struggling. Um, and how I know you talk a lot about sort of self-care for women when they are, living with in-laws. And self-care is something that I talk about as well, but it can also be quite a barrier, I think, for a lot of women. Like, how do you make time for yourself?
Mm,
Is it selfish, or what are people going to think, and all of that kind of thing? So what would your advice be to women who want to practice self-care but don't know where to start?
mm. I would say to start off small, because if we make things too big or we're asking ourselves too much, and it might not be too much in 5 months, but it might be too much now, is just to start off small. So if that self care, and even self care is, it comes in a lot of different forms. It could be that actually you start just spending 2 minutes in the morning writing down your initial stream of thoughts. People call it morning pages, and sometimes
Yeah,
people sit
I
down.
do that.
"Oh, okay."
I've been doing that for about 5 years now. Yeah, it's life changing.
Well, there we go. Yeah. And even that, you might get to a point where you love it so much and it becomes so meaningful to you that you can sit down for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, and just keep writing. But if you want to start off, it could just be 2 minutes. Just set a timer if you want. If you feel that you're going to go over, and um, that's something that you can do. But self care is also starting to become more self aware and noticing what might I be doing that's contributing to my issues, because that's really empowering in itself. And it doesn't mean that you have to be anywhere else or go anywhere else, and you're just with yourself doing what you usually do, but your mindset is in a different space. It could be that you do sign up to something, a workshop, something maybe you're not even related to development. It could just be something that you enjoy, something to do with arts or music, literature. And I mean, I've come across quite a few, comedy nights. I know there's one happening in Bristol next month. That's it's a group of Muslim women, and it might just be that actually you think, oh, that looks really interesting. I've never done that before. Let me just go spend my Saturday evening doing that. And the thing is, it becomes easier the more you do it, because initially, yes, you'll have resistance from yourself. You might have resistance from other people, but you're not doing anything wrong. This is about you living life bit by bit, and choosing what you do, choosing things that are going to lift you up, things that are going to help you to can connect to that joy, connect to life a bit more. These things accumulate over time as well, and they can be hugely transformational. So, yes, self care is needed to manage emotionally, but we also need it to just grow as women.
Yeah, it's fundamental, isn't it? I always say that it begins with self-care, it begins with self-love. In any area of your life that you want to be empowered, if you want to make any sort of change, it always starts with you. So yeah. Thank you so, so much, Nadia. My final question to you, which I was meant to ask at the beginning and forgot, was something I ask all my guests. What makes you rise?
Well, I really love having things that I'm working towards. So, again, whether it's to do with personal development, whether it's spirituality, whether it's work related, I love giving myself a goal that I can reach. It could be to do with exercise and fitness as well, but just something that I can see. Okay, I'm going to do this within the next week, or some things could be short term, some things could be long term. But yeah, I really love having things that I'm working towards. That helps me feel really strong. Um, but also from a spiritual perspective, and this might sound a bit paradoxical, but actually doing things and being in places that remind me of my smallness in comparison to the universe. Because I feel like whether it's a walk in nature, whether it's listening to the ocean, whether it's looking at the sky, the things that remind me of my smallness in comparison to, what's out there and what God has created, that for me really helps to, it takes the pressure off all the worldly stuff. I know I said my goals are important, but we also have our spiritual life. We have the afterlife that we believe in. So it helps me to keep things in perspective, and that helps me to rise in a different way.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Oh, thank you so much, Nadia.
Thank you.
Um,
I've loved the conversation. It's been a real pleasure. So
no, thank you so much, Nadia. I'm I'm going to put all your links and ways for our listeners to contact you in the show notes. And yeah, good luck for your upcoming workshop. Who knows?
Yeah.
I might see you there.
Yeah.